let's take Harvard as an example. Okay, the pinnacle of the woke madrasas. They had all these student organizations immediately come out trying to justify this thing without any information, right? Because in the first 36 hours, obviously not nearly as much information was available as to exactly what happened than has been available now, as an example.
I should read the statement just so people have clarity
Please.
Here. Joint statement by Harvard, Palestine solidarity groups on the situation in Palestine. We, the undersigned student organizations, hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all unfolding violence. Today's events did not occur in a vacuum. For the last 2 decades, millions of Palestinians in Gaza have been forced to live in an open-air prison. Israeli officials promised to, quote, open the gates of hell, and the massacres in Gaza have already commenced. Palestinians in Gaza have no shelters or for refuge and nowhere to escape. In the coming days, Palestinians will be forced to bear the full brunt of Israel's violence. This is deranged and sociopathic.
My point is, you have like 15 or 20 of these student organizations of all ilks, okay? So it's not just pro-Palestinian groups. It was like the Harvard Sikhs Association, okay? Like Sikhs in South Asia are the most peace-loving people in the world. They're not pro-war of any kind whatsoever or pro-terrorism. So all these people write this thing which blames Israel. Okay. Then the school is totally silent. The school doesn't say anything. They neither completely disavow that statement, nor do they come out with a more reasonable statement. All these ex-faculty and ex-individuals, Larry Summers sort of leading, say, this is outrageous, have an opinion. They come out with something that's milquetoast and middle of the road. Then they get soundly rejected by everybody yet again. Then the administration comes out and gives a cleaned up version that tries to allay everybody's anger, because the first statement, I think, basically essentially pissed off everybody on both sides. Then a bunch of alums who've already graduated or who've given money say, these student organizations are outrageous. We will not hire anybody who's part of this because their views are so immoral that we would never want these people part of our organization.
And so here it is. Bill Ackman, just so people have this, Bill Ackman said, I have been asked by a number of CEOs if Harvard would release a list of the members of each of the Harvard organizations that have issued the letter assigning sole responsibility for Hamas's heinous acts to Israel, so as to ensure that none of us inadvertently hire any of their members. In other words, you must own your words, which is an important lesson for
So then what happens is individual students actually have to come out who are part of these associations that were signatories to the first release, had to disavow the statement and said, actually, I'm just an Indian student at Harvard Law School. There's Nick, maybe you can find this tweet of this like Indian woman from Colorado or of Indian heritage. And she's like, you just get auto-recruited into these organizations when you join Harvard. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. This is a place that's supposed to be for like modern free speech, progressive thinking. And instead what happens is based on your skin color, you get auto-drafted into some association. Then you auto-sign any press release written by some person that you don't even see or approve. What is going on at these places? And these are the places that parents and kids are tripping over themselves, trying to get into. Kids will kill themselves if they don't get into. And these are the worst institutions in America, because back to Jason, what we talked about earlier, which is we need people who can think from first principles. Those kids are not it, and those institutions are not making them. And so if we want to have a point in time where when things like this happen, we can really figure out what happened in the past that was right and what can we do in the future, it's not this. And it's not this kind of thinking. And if you're going to a school, Harvard, Cornell, UPenn, Stanford, that are spitting out these kids, I think it's a real shame. These schools are woke madrasas.
Yeah. So a couple of points on that. So if you look at their statement, I think it's appropriate and fine to express concern about the people, the civilians living in Gaza, and what the Israeli response might entail. I think it is fine and good to do that, both for humanitarian reasons and for self-interested reasons if you're a supporter of Israel, because this could all spiral out of control. However, these people completely lit their credibility on fire from the first paragraph by saying that Israel was entirely responsible for what happened and not having one word of condemnation for the atrocities that had just been committed. They cannot even see the war crimes that have occurred.
Yeah.
So they don't even mention Hamas. They don't even mention the actual people that perpetrated the crime.
Right.
Do you guys think that Bill Ackman was out of line by saying, I don't want to hire kids from these organizations and these schools? Because it's just like these kids and these schools will bring, basically, I think what he's implicitly saying is distraction, and it will lower the probability that I achieve my corporate goals. So these are not good workers.
Based on your comment about thinking from first principles and being able to assess the situation, I think that's probably what happens at a hedge fund. You have to place bets and you have to be able to think from first principles and be intellectually rigorous. This is the most intellectually lazy approach. I'm just going to sign a piece of paper without even thinking. So no, I don't think it's out of line. I think it's an important lesson for people. Yeah, this is not freedom of speech. This is owning your words. You must own your words and position. And it's important that young people learn this now. You have to own your words, whether it's on social media or signing some stupid petition that you didn't read. And there's a lot of backtracking going on right now, by the way.
I can't believe that if I got into Harvard, I would get auto-drafted into the Brown Men's Association just because of the color of my skin. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Fat Greek group.
I mean,
let's point out the double standard here that these elite Harvard students want to be exempt from their words, their statements. They don't want to be canceled for that. However, you know that when some hapless schmuck basically posts some tweet or posted a tweet 10 years ago that gets resurfaced, they're the first ones clamoring for their cancellation.
Right. Yeah. They would like
for their firing.
They would like amnesty for their idiotic opinions. Yeah.
Well, it's good for the goose here is good for the gander. If they're going to create a cancel culture where people get canceled for their decade-old tweets and so forth, then they should be prepared to live by that standard. Now, look, personally, I would have some degree of forgiveness for a college student being part of an organization that puts out a statement. They're claiming they didn't know. Okay, but then why didn't you resign? Look, I don't think there's a good excuse for this other than youthful stupidity. So I wouldn't cancel them forever. But look, I do think that it's fine for and appropriate for someone like Bill Ackman to say, I don't want to hire you people.
Yeah, and I would just be careful for you to add the word youthful because I think it's a get out of jail free card. It's definitely stupidity. The question is the cake baked? And if the cake is baked, then there's a big argument to never hiring these people. I mean, look, I would just say
your frontal lobes are still developing until you're 25 years old. So I would give college kids a bit of a pass if they do stupid stuff. You're there to learn. You're there to make mistakes.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
This is a huge mistake. You're saying the bake's fully baked. You mean like their opinions and who they are
what I'm
fully
saying
baked?
is you learn a lot from actions. Drink too much, don't drink. Don't exercise enough, you get a little sluggish, maybe a little overweight. I get all of that. I'm not convinced that when you have this fundamentally specific way of thinking, that you can unwind that so easily, Jason. So I'm not convinced that this mind virus gets fixed because you all of a sudden need a job. I actually think like maybe it's the struggle of realizing that there are deep consequences to this vein of thinking, that this oppressed versus oppressor, or the other way that it was framed in our group chat is that wokeism and the embracement of socialism is basically running away from excellence. It's this idea that everybody has to be the same. What communism says, we all are the same. Nobody is special. We're all going to work together, do the same things. We're all going to dress in the same ways. It's the collective we. There aren't going to be exceptional outliers. But the problem is that's not how the world works. And so the other part of why these woke madrasas are so terrible is that it teaches, I think, to work away from excellence. And instead of striving for excellence, to strive to be part of a collective. And I think that is fundamentally corrosive to America. It's corrosive to what got us here. It's corrosive to all the great countries in the world. And so then again, it's like, why would you hire kids who fundamentally don't want to be excellent, who are afraid that if they were excellent, they would be guilty of something? That's ultimately the question. Why would any of these kids go to such an elite school to basically be taught that it's wrong to excel?
All right. Well, let's say, I think perhaps a good segue.
And then as a result, not think for yourself. And then as a result, sign something like this, which is just stupid.